Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. I am Susie Jackson. I'm a news editor at LinkedIn, coming to you live today to have a conversation about The Office. Do you remember that place you used to go to do your work? We're going to talk with Wall Street Journal reporter Chip Cutter, who has been covering how companies are responding with productivity in this pandemic, what it's been like when all of us have started to leave the office and work remotely, as well as have a conversation with INSEAD professor Gianpiero Petriglieri, who just wrote a love letter to The Office in the latest issue of the Harvard Business Review. Before we get to that main story and those great guests, I want to check in on some of the trending stories on LinkedIn today, August 10th. In some somber news, the US has surpassed 5 million confirmed cases of coronavirus. This is just 17 days after crossing the 4 million mark. More than 162,000 Americans have died from the virus in the US, which is a far higher number than in other countries. We are also seeing Amazon look to turn Sears and JCPenney locations into fulfillment centers, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. Talks with mall owner Simon Property Group began before the pandemic, but it's not clear how many locations could be in play. LinkedIn member Sonia Chung coming to the platform to point out that it's ironic that digital disruption contributed to the demise of physical retail, and now companies like Amazon are taking over those very physical spaces that they upended. For more stories like these, check out the LinkedIn News module. If you're on your desktop, you can find it to the right of your newsfeed, or if you're on mobile, you can click into the search box to find those stories and more. That brings us to today's poll from the LinkedIn News team. We want to know if you feel like your workday has gotten longer as a result of coronavirus. Tell us throughout the show today in the comments. Tell us yes or no, and maybe add some detail about what's going into that feeling, that decision. And we're going to check in on results at the end of the show. Which brings us to our main story today, which is the physical office. Some workers are being brought back into their workplaces, but many remain remote, myself included, and maybe will be for some time. Companies saw an initial uptick in productivity and as boundaries melted away and people panic worked through lockdowns. But some companies are starting to question whether or not that's sustainable. How long can that kind of pace go on? I want to hear from you on this. Are you settled into a new routine? Is it feeling pretty good? Or are you really hoping to get back to the office soon? Talk to me, talk to each other. We want to get to as many of your thoughts, comments, and questions as we can throughout the show today. To talk through some of these questions from the company point of view, I want to welcome my first guest. Chip Cutter is a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and he's been covering companies across the pandemic since it began. Chip, welcome to the show.
Hey, Susie, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you, Chip. I've been so interested in all the examples that you're uncovering in your reporting. I'm curious if you can walk us through the evolution on the way executives are thinking about remote work from a productivity point of view. What's been good? We heard in the beginning we're getting more work done, but what's starting to emerge as unsustainable?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think we've all experienced this in our personal lives too, where there's been a bit of a shift where right when everybody went home in March and April, a lot of executives were saying they were just amazed at how well this was working. But now that we're 4 months into the pandemic, a number of companies are saying that some cracks are emerging and that they're finding that things are actually slowing down, that deadlines are being missed, and that teams just aren't working as well together as they might have if they were all together in the same space. That's not to say that remote work doesn't have its advantages and that a lot of people certainly are finding it helpful to be home. But so, for example, I talked with one company, Discover Financial, which is the big credit card company, and they were talking about just hiring call center agents. So they've hired thousands of call center agents since March. In the old days, those people used to go into a classroom outside of Chicago, where the company has its corporate headquarters, and they would train in a classroom for 6 weeks, and they'd be able to take lunches and ask their more experienced colleagues, what does that mean? How do we do this? And they say that they're finding that it's just really difficult to try to get these people up to speed. And even for their colleagues who work in data science or marketing or kind of some more traditional office functions, they're finding those teams, the newer employees on those teams, are just missing something when they're not able to turn to their colleagues sitting next to them and ask, what does that jargon mean, or to help them decipher something about the company. And so we've heard kind of similar kind of veins of this through a lot of different companies where they're finding that it's just maybe not as rosy as it might have seemed initially of how well this is all working.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you make about the training environment. You've got employees coming in fresh, coming in cold, not knowing the cues, the social cues of the company, being able to ask questions, those little over the desk kind of questions you might throw to your colleague. And we've talked in the show a lot about social capital too, that perhaps some of this remote work was successful in the beginning because you were physical in same spaces with your coworkers before. You built up that relationship that you could kind of burn through as we're all switching to remote. But in thinking about that, we've got new employees coming in your example. How are executives trying to think about timelines now? We had the initial kind of panic, we're home. Now we're settling into this different time horizon. We have some companies announcing that employees won't be coming back until at least the next calendar year. How are executives kind of thinking about this? Is it in terms of weeks, months? Is it day to day?
Yeah, a number of them say it is day to day. I think we've got a couple of interesting points coming up. Labor Day is becoming kind of this threshold for some companies saying we want to get people back after Labor Day. That strikes many as too soon and is causing some issues. But then you also see a kind of a wave of announcements for July 2021. A number of companies have said we just want to stop putting dates out there, that it's too hard to predict. We don't want to kind of cause issues with employees. And so we're saying we're going to give you updates every week or so, every 2 weeks as this evolves. But a number of executives are saying they're thinking once the pandemic passes, if there is a viable vaccine or treatment and it feels safe to return to offices, that's when a number say we want to get back. And so it's companies that range from big financial services players like Stifel Financial to small companies. I talked with a robotics startup in San Francisco that missed a deadline by about a month. And they said it was just really hard to try to build equipment when you've got software engineers and other engineers scattered across the Bay Area. This company actually signed a lease in right now, about a month ago, for a much bigger space just so they could try to get people back together in San Francisco so everybody could be in the same room working on this new product that they're creating. And so, you see kind of a mix here, but I think the sentiment that I'm hearing from a lot of companies is that once it is safe to get back, we don't know when that will be. We do want to return to physical offices in some form.
Yeah, and we've got members in the stream checking in and saying the same thing. Esther says she really misses working in the office, that she doesn't function well without a schedule, the routine, and the interactions with coworkers. If you're just joining us now, this is my guest, Chip Cutter. He's a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, joining me on Business Unusual, where today we're talking about the office. And do you want to get back there? Was it a great place for you? Hello to Dolores from Dallas and Derek from Washington, D.C., joining us on Business Unusual today. Thank you. Emily says that working from home was great, but she's been in the back in the office since June already, so a month, 6 weeks or so. The biggest issue is missing those little conversations throughout the day that were so important. And we're hearing that in your reporting, Chip, as well, with the training center. You just kind of miss something if you're not in the same space physically as someone, even if the remote work is pretty seamless.
That's it. And I think a lot of us have had success with it because we know our colleagues really well. We know their little quirks on Slack. We know what they mean. We can kind of look at their facial expressions on a video call and get a sense for kind of how they're thinking. But if you're new to a company, of course, you don't have those relationships, and it's tougher to build them. So I think that's become an issue that has emerged. But I also think just as projects, as teams, as we kind of go, more into this, there are teams being set up inside some companies where you have people from different departments who may not have worked together, even if they're not new to a company. They just don't have those relationships that you might have had in the past, and they don't have necessarily kind of the culture of remote work that some kind of more experienced players in this have built up over the years. And so I think it's just tough for some companies that are going through this right now. That said, we've seen repeatedly in surveys a number of people saying they want to work about 50% at home, 50% in the office. This was the case at Facebook, for example. A number of surveys of Facebook employees have shown this, and at other companies. And so I think a lot of employees are thinking about kind of a lot of employers are thinking about a hybrid future here, where one company put it to me kind of like office hours, where they're going to have core hours in the office, where you would be together with your colleagues for designated times throughout the week, where then you could kind of bounce ideas off each other, have that in-person interaction, but then you'd have other times to be at home and to kind of get that focused productivity that I think a lot of us have enjoyed in the pandemic.
I think that's so interesting as companies are actually going to come out and be more forthright about what these changes are, and not just, come back and make it work for you, but to put more of a stake in the ground on here's how we might reshape things more intentionally. We've got some members in the stream, kind of great comments today. Tamika is saying she's fine with working from home as well. She has her moments where she feels like she's missing something, but for her, that doesn't outweigh her desire to stay home. And we have Billy saying that the issue is not remote or face-to-face, but adapting the training and the socialization to meet the remote environment needs, more intentional actions are necessary. Shep, you mentioned Facebook a minute ago. I want to talk about them as an example because they've just done something really interesting. In the same breath, they've said that employees can work remotely until 2021, but they also just signed a lease for 730,000 square feet of office space in Midtown Manhattan. What's going on? Is that contradictory, or what are we seeing with that?
Yeah, it's sometimes I think hard to square all of this. Facebook, I think, has been upfront in saying that certainly we're going to embrace remote work over the next decade. But the company has also said that a number of employees won't be good fits for remote work. They have said, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, in announcing this news, said that he thinks younger workers, when they're just starting their career, they need to be in an office because so much learning happens by osmosis, by kind of watching how your more experienced peers do things. And I think you can also make the case that there will be kind of a pent up demand to get back into offices, into physical spaces when it is safe to do so. Facebook has been hiring thousands, even recently through the pandemic. And so you can kind of see them thinking both ways here, where they're taking this office space in this postal building in New York. We probably both walked past there and seen the construction that's been happening over the past couple of years. So they want to have that space so that they're able, as they continue to hire, and as some people have that desire to work in offices, that's there. But they're certainly saying that we're also going to embrace remote work. We're going to hire more broadly across the US. I think you can have both here. And I think that's probably what this decision means. It's more of a long-term thinking of saying offices will still have a place at the company, even as we embrace remote work more than we may have in the past.
So offices aren't going anywhere. And talk to me a little bit about the lease length typically on offices. I think a lot of us are getting nervous that we're all going to go remote. What happens to the office? Is everyone just going to clear out of cities? But is that actually possible with the contracts that they tend to sign?
It's really not. Analysts at Moody's did a kind of research into this recently and released a report in July, and they found that in the U.S. the average lease term is about 8 years, is more than 8 years. And so some of the companies that have given up their offices recently, and I've talked with some of them, they're ones that had leases coming up in July, for example. And so they said, okay, we're going to get rid of our offices now. It's going to save us money. Our people are doing fine remotely. But a number of companies are not in that boat. I mean, they are in these long-term leases. Most leases are more than 8 years. It's going to be a while until these leases come up. And at that point, who knows where we might be? And some companies might say, okay, it makes sense to hold on to our real estate.
So someone in the stream, I think, who is going to be happy to hear for that is Patricia, who says she is not set up to work from home. And she wrote "not" in all caps. She's not having it. She says she'd love to sit at her desk again with two monitors. So for folks like Patricia, who is a bit of a hardware issue there, just doesn't have the space, doesn't have the physical stuff she needs. Folks like her in mind, talk to me about the phenomenon you're seeing where people are getting together outside of the office. They don't need the physical space, but maybe they need that remote the connection to come from the remote world back into the physical again.
Yeah, well, this has been really interesting to me. I kept kind of hearing this pop up when you were talking with executives and employees. We're saying we are so desperate to get together that we will do anything we can to do that safely. And so we have this kind of trend of these socially distant outdoor meetings. So one company in Columbus, Ohio, their marketing team got together in their parking lot. They ordered Chipotle, and everybody kind of had their cars set around a kind of a big circle, and they talked about company strategy and upcoming plans. Other employees at other companies are meeting up in parks, for example, and kind of there has been this kind of desire to find all different sort of spaces. So some are meeting in backyards. It's a kind of a mix, and so one company in South Carolina, for example, is decided to have a monthly team meeting on the beach. This company is based in Charleston, and so they held their first meeting last month. About 20 employees gathered at 8 a.m. This was a hot, humid day in Charleston, and everybody got together and for 3 hours talked about quarterly goals, talked about recent business results. The CEO even brought a whiteboard with him. And I asked him, did this seem strange at all? Were people walking by the beach saying, what is going on over there? All these people clustered and talking over a whiteboard. And he said, no, I mean, in the COVID era, kind of our definition of what's strange has completely changed. And so nobody really kind of seemed to raise an eyebrow at it.
Yeah, I still think personally I would feel strange wearing a bathing suit in front of my coworkers at a beach meeting, but I like the spirit of it. But with that in mind, that's a potential awkward new situation. I mean, and what if you're an employee who left the state during the pandemic for safety or for other reasons, or you just don't feel comfortable coming back in person and seeing people? Are you at a disadvantage there? You're going to miss out on some social interaction that might be helping boost your other colleagues further along.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that's a real fear here. So many people just do not feel comfortable, even if it is an outdoor gathering where people are wearing masks and have their seats far apart. And so I don't think companies have gotten a good handle on this of how to include people, making sure that they still are getting that same benefit that others are in person. Some of the companies that are doing the outdoor meetings, for example, are bringing speakers along or trying to make kind of this real effort to connect people, virtually, those who are still at home, so they can be part of these meetings. And that's fine, but you can also imagine that some employees they're also benefiting from being able to talk to their boss in person or their colleagues in person before or after the meeting. And so you kind of increasingly hear this term about how to create remote equality, of how to kind of make it seem that we're all on kind of an even playing field when some people might be in the office and some are remote. One company, it's Philip Morris International, the tobacco company. They have a rule where if some people are going to be in the office and others are remote, they want everybody to be remote. They want everybody to kind of have the same size square on a Zoom meeting. So it's not a couple of people in a meeting room, a couple of people remote at home. And I think, we're seeing other kind of companies try similar things, looking at how do we kind of create an environment where nobody feels left out here.
Well, Chip, thank you for coming on the show to share that with us. We really would look forward to having you on again as you're monitoring all this and seeing where some of those things are going. But remote equality, I think that's really interesting to keep in mind as we all kind of claw our way back to some sense of whatever the new normal is. Thank you for joining us today.
Always great to chat. Thanks, Susie.
That was Chip Cutter. He's a reporter at the Wall Street Journal covering the way companies are responding throughout the pandemic. I'm sure we're going to have him back on again. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Chip. I want to come back to the LinkedIn News poll question today for a moment to see if you feel like your workday has gotten longer as a result of coronavirus. Keep those votes coming in. We're going to see where we stand at the end of this show. I also want to welcome to the show today my next guest. Gianpiero Petriglieri is a professor at INSEAD. Gianpiero, welcome to the show.
Hi, Susie. Thank you for having me.
Gianpiero, you recently wrote a love letter to the office in the latest issue of the Harvard Business Review, but you also refer to your own office as a box. I'm kind of curious, how does the office play into our personal identities and our work cultures?
Extremely important. I mean, you have to have a box so that you can think, outside of it. It's I want to say first, that's what inspired me. And I wrote the essay partly out of my experience of, I spent 10 years freelancing before having my first full-time job. And now I've had one for 14 years. And if I compare, give me the stress of the office. Any day. I think a lot of the things that Chip said were extremely important. Look, the office is in many ways not just a physical place where we...
Gianpiero, we're having a little trouble hearing you. If you can hear me, I'm going to have you restart your browser and maybe join us again in a minute. And we'll see you in just a second. Maybe that'll help our connection problem. Okay. In the meantime, I want to hear from some of you in the stream. We're going to get Gianpiero back as soon as we can, I hope, because he's got a lot of great insights to share with us. But the stream is popping today. We have Rebecca saying she likes the convenience of no commute, but have a hard time drawing the lines between work and home spaces. That's something I have found as well, Rebecca. She says she ends up working more than I should because the boundary between work and home is transparent. So, Rebecca, I hope you voted in our poll. It sounds like you would say the workday is feeling a lot longer. We've heard advice from other folks on the show saying to build in a new kind of routine in place of your evening commute. Maybe that's taking a walk around the block. Gianpiero, thank you for coming back in. Let's see if we can hear you a little bit better this time.
Can you hear me now?
I can, and you look a little more clear too. Right. So fun in the age of remote work. It's no problem. We're rolling with the punches. You were explaining to me about the identity that you can have tied up in office. Can you just maybe touch on that a little bit more for folks who couldn't hear you?
I mean, I think on the best of cases, the office allows you to be the best worker, the best professional you can be. It gives you the physical resources, it gives you the routines, it gives you the relationship, the connections that allow you to do your best work. In fact, when I think of offices that I hear people speak fondly of, I'm very interested in talking to people about, what makes you miss your office. And what they miss is four things. One is a sense of routine, a sense of, knowing what the day is going to look like. Another one is very often they miss the people, they miss the relationship, they miss a sense of shared enterprise. It's harder. You have to constantly remind yourself while working from home that you're part of something larger. And fourth, of course, they miss a physical place where they can work ideally undistracted, uninterrupted, with Wi-Fi that doesn't play tricks on them, in a chair that's relatively comfortable. And of course, I don't want to paint too rosy a picture. The office can be a place of oppression, can be a place of discrimination, can be a place of destruction, can be a place where we waste our time. But when it works in the good moment, is a place where we can actually focus and connect.
Yeah.
And
so we're there's two sides of it. The office,
anyways,
you've got a chair that feels good.
You can think of it as a
screen that works as well. And but then there's also the thing, you can be a form of oppression too, you're saying. I want to check in a couple stream comments here. We have Dolores who says there are pluses and minuses to everything. The key is being adaptive, and sometimes that's hard if you only know the office routine. So we talked about in the beginning of the show, are you getting into new routines? Are you maybe bunching your work by task instead of looking strictly at the clock these days? Amanda says, I was a detailed person and new to a team in a different department with my company. I agree that it's hard to learn a new job skill remotely. All the digital work is difficult. I might not go back to the office until next year, so really have to make it work. I'm going to take a moment to bring Chip Cutter back into the show. We're having some difficulties hearing Gianpiero, and Gianpiero, you're here as well. So if we can hear from you, we're going to try. But I know Chip's connection is working pretty well as well. Chip, speaking of remote work, we just had Amanda in the stream saying that she started this job just full digital, has come on board and had to figure it out, and is not going to meet these colleagues for who knows how long. What are you seeing in your reporting in terms of other companies dealing with that kind of situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think so many people are having to deal with this right now. And so some companies, for example, are organizing kind of game nights, virtual pasta nights, ways to kind of get new employees to spend time together and to bond in ways that you might do, in person. A number of kind of new employees that I've talked to have said that they've also just had to take it upon themselves to really reach out to others on Slack and to kind of try to build these connections with people that they don't know. And so oftentimes I think it creates some extra work for new employees, but they say that they have to do it. This is their way to try to kind of build those bridges and relationships inside companies. And so certainly you see kind of big employers trying to do their part. I think so much of it just comes down to trying to build those one-on-one relationships that we know can be so helpful for navigating big companies and navigating any kind of organization.
Yeah, we've got Emily in the stream talking about something similar. She says, working from home has been great. My team and I have video chats at the beginning and the end of the week to catch up on work and personal happenings. So it sounds like they're kind of bookending the video chats. We all know about Zoom fatigue, trying to limit that or just kind of reshape more intentionally the pattern of the work week. And Emily is doing that by squishing all the actual work into the middle of the week and trying to just catch up in the beginning and end. Are you seeing companies, you were talking earlier about companies talking about, was it core days, about bringing people back at certain times? Are you seeing them roll out those plans already? Or are you seeing other companies kind of think of different things? What are you seeing in your reporting?
Yeah, absolutely. So some are already saying, like, let's plan this out. Let's say Coursera, for example, the big online learning company, has said, most of our employees are going to work 3 days in the office and 2 at home, and that's changing how they're thinking about this. But you see a lot of companies, to her point, kind of trying to think of other ways to kind of keep people connected. Kind, the big snack bar maker, has held online plank competitions for employees. So this is new employees and old, but a way to kind of get people together and bonding in ways where you're just not talking about work, to try to get over some of that Zoom fatigue that we've all had. So yes, you're still on a video, but maybe you're holding a plank, and that you've got a bit of a competition with your coworkers that helps you connect with them in a way that you might not over email or Slack.
plank competitions. Did I hear that right, Chip? So you have to set up your video camera to show yourself like full body planking on something to have a competition with your colleagues.
That's
Wow.
it. The winner apparently was able to hold a plank for 3 hours. It was an engineer at Kind. I still am dubious of that myself. I think, over a minute seems impressive, but anyway, that's yeah. So this was one way for the company to bond.
Wow, I guess it's also a way to promote fitness in a time where maybe you're not getting out as much, but that 3 hours is pretty intense. I don't know if there's some digital trickery going on there with fake videos or whatever, but we'll keep an eye on that one. Chip, thank you again for coming back on and helping us with some trouble. We couldn't quite hear Jim Pero, but maybe we'll have him back on soon. It was really great to chat with you, and we're looking forward to seeing where your reporting takes you.
Thanks so much, Susie. Great to chat.
I want to check back in with you quickly on our poll of the day. We are asking if you feel like your workday has gotten longer as a result of coronavirus. We're seeing an overwhelming number of you say yes. I'm seeing yeses from Sadiq, Christine, Monica, Tammy, Brika, Jason. Thank you for voting. We're seeing no from Paul, Phil, Felipe, Emily, Bob, Evie. Maybe you're working more efficiently, so you feel like your workday has actually gotten shorter. I want to thank you all for voting and for joining the show today. This is Business Unusual. We are live 4 days a week from the LinkedIn news page at 12 Eastern. Please join us back here tomorrow for a conversation my colleague Caroline Fairchild will be having with Time Solutions CEO Mark Wilson, talking about jobs in under-resourced communities. It's going to be a great conversation. Please tune back in for that tomorrow at noon Eastern. Thank you so much for joining us today and dealing with our technical difficulties. Your comments were wonderful. We love to see them on Business Unusual. Keep them coming, and we'll see you soon.